Michael Jackson, the king of pop, unexpectedly died.
Are both now reporting that Michael Jackson has died.
What Michael Jackson's doctor said was that they had chemically castrated him, and they kept him like a castrato, anesthetizing him every night.
16 years later, Michael Jackson's story still hasn't settled. What was once reported as history slowly turned into something else. Questions that never fully disappeared, details that were documented but never completely clarified, and moments that the world still debated in silence.
This was Michael Jackson under the influence of an intoxicant, and Conrad Murray, still knowing these things, continued to give him these drugs and these intoxicants.
Because sometimes the most powerful stories are not the ones that end. They are the ones that keep echoing long after the final headline fades. Today we go back through the life, the death, and the unanswered questions that continue to surround Michael Jackson and the parts of his story the world still cannot stop trying to understand. The boy who became the king of pop. Before the fame, before the moonwalk, and before the world called him the king of pop, Michael Jackson was just a young boy growing up in a small working-class home in Gary, Indiana. But even as a child, there was something unusual about him. The moment Michael opened his mouth to sing, people paid attention. His voice carried an emotion and confidence far beyond his age. While most children spent their afternoons playing outside, Michael spent countless hours rehearsing music with his brothers under the strict guidance of his father, Joseph Jackson. Practice was serious inside the Jackson household. Mistakes were not tolerated. Long rehearsals became part of everyday life, and from a very young age, Michael was pushed to perform at a level far beyond what most children could handle. But somewhere inside those exhausting rehearsals, a star was being created. By the late 1960s, Michael and his brothers officially became the Jackson 5. At first, they performed in small clubs and talent shows, but it did not take long for people in the music industry to notice something special about the youngest lead singer in the group. Michael's energy on stage was unbelievable. He could dance, sing, and command attention in ways that seemed impossible for someone his age. Soon, the Jackson 5 signed with Motown Records, and almost overnight, their lives changed forever. Hit songs like I Want You Back, ABC, and I'll Be There quickly climbed the charts. Crowds screamed wherever they performed. Fans rushed to concerts just to catch a glimpse of young Michael Jackson. And while the entire group became famous, it was clear that Michael stood out. He had charisma, he had confidence, and most importantly, he had a rare connection with audiences that could not be taught. But fame came with a cost. While millions of fans admired Michael's talent, his childhood slowly disappeared behind cameras, interviews, rehearsals, and non-stop performances. Life became less normal with every passing year. Instead of growing up quietly like other children, Michael was growing up in front of the entire world. Still, Michael wanted more. As he entered his teenage years, he began moving beyond the image of a child star. He studied music carefully, watched legendary performers closely, and pushed himself to become greater with every performance. Then, during the late 1970s, Michael made a decision that changed his life forever. He began focusing on a solo career. Working alongside legendary producer Quincy Jones, Michael released Off the Wall, an album that blended pop, disco, funk, and soul into something fresh and exciting. The album became a huge success and proved that Michael Jackson was no longer just the lead singer of a family group. He was becoming a superstar on his own. But even that success was only the beginning, because soon, Michael Jackson would release an album so powerful that it would completely change music, fame, and pop culture forever. And the world would never look at entertainment the same way again. Thriller and the birth of a global icon. By the early 1980s, Michael Jackson was already one of the biggest names in music. Off the Wall had turned him into a successful solo artist, and fans everywhere were fascinated by his voice, his dancing, and his stage presence. But for Michael, success was never enough. He did not just want to be famous. He wanted to create something the world would never forget. And in 1982, he did exactly that. Michael released Thriller, At first, nobody could fully predict what was about to happen, but within months, it felt like the entire world was listening to Michael Jackson. Radio stations played his songs non-stop. Music stores struggled to keep the album on shelves. Fans lined up for hours hoping to buy tickets, posters, records, or anything connected to his name. Then came the songs that would define an entire generation. Billie Jean, Beat It, Thriller. Each one became a global hit. But what made Michael different from other artists was not just the music. It was the way he turned every performance into an unforgettable experience. Michael wanted audiences to feel amazed every time they watched him. And that changed entertainment forever. Before Michael Jackson, music videos were usually simple. Most artists stood in front of cameras, sang their songs, and that was enough. But Michael saw music videos differently. He treated them like short films filled with storytelling, choreography, emotion, and cinematic production. When the Billie Jean video was released, audiences were mesmerized by Michael's smooth dancing and mysterious style. But the moment that truly changed pop culture happened during a televised Motown anniversary performance in 1983. Michael stepped onto the stage wearing black pants, a black jacket, white socks, and one sparkling glove. The crowd erupted before the performance even began. Then suddenly, Michael appeared to glide backwards across the stage without lifting his feet. The moonwalk. Nobody had ever seen anything like it before. The audience screamed in shock. Television viewers across America sat frozen in disbelief. And overnight, Michael Jackson became more than just a music star. He became a worldwide phenomenon. But the biggest moment was still ahead. When the Thriller music video premiered, it completely transformed the entertainment industry. The video looked more like a Hollywood horror movie than a normal music performance. It featured zombies, dramatic storytelling, special effects, and choreography people would remember forever. Fans gathered around televisions just to watch it repeatedly. Children copied the dance routines. People dressed like Michael. His influence spread across music, fashion, dance, and pop culture itself. Soon Michael Jackson was everywhere. His concerts sold out within minutes. Fans fainted during performances. Crowds chased his cars through city streets. Around the world, millions of people became obsessed with the man now known as the King of Pop. And in 1984, Thriller won a record-breaking 8 Grammy Awards in one night. No artist had ever reached that level before. But while the world celebrated Michael's success, something else was quietly beginning behind the scenes. The bigger Michael Jackson became, the harder it became for him to escape the pressure of being Michael Jackson. The weight of global fame. By the mid-1980s, Michael Jackson was no longer just a successful musician. He had become something the world had never seen before, a global standard. Every move he made was studied. Every performance was analyzed. Every appearance turned into a worldwide event. He wasn't just famous anymore, he was constantly under a microscope. At first, fame had been exciting. It opened doors, brought opportunities, and allowed him to perform on stages bigger than he ever imagined as a child in Gary, Indiana. But as time went on, that same fame began to change shape. It became pressure, and then it became something heavier. Every new project Michael released was expected to outperform the last. After Thriller, the world wasn't simply waiting for music. They were waiting for history. That expectation created a silent burden that followed him everywhere he went. Even ordinary moments were no longer ordinary. Walking outside meant crowds. Traveling meant security teams. Creating music meant competing not with other artists, but with his own legacy. People didn't just want Michael Jackson. They wanted the version of him they remembered, the flawless performances, the impossible dance moves, the voice that seemed untouchable. But Michael was human, and that expectation created a gap between the person and the image. Inside that gap, pressure grew. He became known for perfectionism in the studio and on stage. Hours would be spent refining movements that the audience might only see for a few seconds. If something felt even slightly off, it had to be fixed again and again. To the outside world, it looked like dedication. But behind the scenes, it was also exhausting. Friends and collaborators noticed that the world around him was getting smaller, not physically, but emotionally. Fewer places felt private. Fewer moments felt safe from judgment. In Michael's world, success was not something you achieved once. It was something you had to defend constantly. Every performance had to remind the world why he was still at the top. And that silent pressure, the need to always remain Michael Jackson, slowly became one of the heaviest forces in his life. It was no longer just fame. It was an expectation without rest. And that pressure would eventually lead him toward decisions, environments, and choices that would shape the final years of his life in ways the world would later struggle to understand. The comeback that turned tragic. By the late 2000s, Michael Jackson was standing at a point in his life that felt both powerful and fragile at the same time. On one hand, he was still one of the most recognized entertainers in the world. On the other hand, years away from large-scale touring had created uncertainty about what his return would look like. Then came the announcement, a new concert series called This Is It. It was meant to take place in London and was promoted as Michael Jackson's return to the stage. Not just a tour, but a major comeback that would reconnect him with fans who had waited years to see him perform live again. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Tickets sold out almost instantly. Reports suggested that more than 1 million people tried to purchase seats. Fans traveled across countries just for a chance to witness what many believed would be a historic moment in music. For the world, it felt like Michael Jackson was back. And in many ways, he was. During rehearsals, footage showed glimpses of the performer people remembered, the precision in his movement, the attention to detail, the way he directed dancers, musicians, and production teams like someone still fully in control of his craft. It reminded everyone why he had become a global icon in the first place. But rehearsals only showed part of the story. Behind the stage lights and studio cameras, there was another reality. The demands of preparing for a large-scale production at that level were intense. Long rehearsal hours, constant pressure to perfect every segment, and the physical strain of performing choreography at an elite level all began to take a toll. Michael was not new to hard work. He had spent his entire life performing, but this time felt different. There was more at stake. The This Is It concerts were not only about returning to the stage, they were also tied to financial expectations, public expectations, and the pressure of proving that he could still deliver at the highest level. That combination created a heavy environment around him. As rehearsals continued, concern began to quietly grow among some people close to the production. Not in a dramatic way, but in small observations, fatigue, long nights, and the intensity required just to keep up with the schedule. Still, the project moved forward, because everyone involved understood what it represented. This wasn't just another concert series, it was Michael Jackson's return, and the world was watching every detail unfold, expecting something unforgettable. But what no one could fully see at the time was how fragile the balance had become between preparation and pressure, between expectation and exhaustion. And eventually, that balance would collapse on one early morning in Los Angeles, changing everything the world thought it knew about the King of Pop. The night everything changed. On the morning of June 25th, 2009, something happened in Los Angeles that would instantly become one of the most shocking moments in modern music history. At first there was confusion, then silence, then panic. Inside a rented mansion in Holmby Hills, Michael Jackson had gone into medical distress. What was supposed to be a normal morning during preparations for rehearsals quickly turned into an emergency situation. Attempts were made immediately to help him, but the situation was already critical. Within minutes, emergency services were called to the scene, and paramedics rushed toward the location. Outside that house, nothing about the world had changed yet. But inside, everything already had. When Michael Jackson was transported to the hospital, news had not yet fully reached the public. It was still unclear what had happened, and early reports were inconsistent. Some outlets hesitated, others speculated, and within a very short time, rumors began spreading faster than verified information. Then came the confirmation that changed everything. Michael Jackson had died. The news spread across the world in seconds. Television anchors struggled to speak through the shock. Radio stations stopped their usual programming. Social media platforms, still growing rapidly at the time, exploded with disbelief. Fans gathered wherever they could outside hospitals, outside his home, and in public squares across different countries. Many were crying, some were silent. Others simply stood still, trying to process something that felt impossible. Because Michael Jackson was not just another celebrity. He was a global figure who had shaped music, dance, fashion, and entertainment for decades. For many people, his presence had always felt permanent, like someone who would always exist in the background of culture. And now, suddenly, he was gone. In the hours that followed, confusion turned into investigation. Authorities began looking into the circumstances surrounding his final moments. Questions emerged about what had happened inside the mansion earlier that morning and who had been present. But at that exact moment, the world was not focused on details. It was focused on shock. Grief spread across continents. Fans played his music non-stop. Radio stations dedicated entire hours to his songs. Social media timelines were filled with memories, performances, and messages from people trying to say goodbye. Yet even in those first moments, one thing was already clear. This was not going to be a simple story of loss. Because the circumstances surrounding that morning would soon lead to deeper questions, investigations, and revelations that would dominate headlines for years to come. And as the world waited for answers, one question stood above everything else. How did it really happen? The hidden truth behind his death. After the shock of Michael Jackson's passing settled across the world, attention quickly shifted from grief to questions. Not just about what happened, but how it happened inside the final hours of his life. The official findings later confirmed that Michael Jackson's death was caused by acute propofol intoxication, combined with other sedative medications found in his system. These included drugs commonly used in medical settings to reduce anxiety, induce sleep, or prepare patients for procedures. However, what made the case so unusual was not only the substances involved, but the environment in which they were reportedly administered. Propofol is a powerful anesthetic designed for hospital use. It is typically given in controlled environments such as operating rooms, where patients are continuously monitored with specialized equipment. Under normal medical practice, it is not used as a sleep aid outside of clinical supervision. But according to investigative reports and court testimony, Michael Jackson had been receiving this type of medication inside a private residence. This detail became one of the central points of the investigation. His personal physician, Dr. Conrad Murray, later acknowledged administering sedative medications as part of efforts to help Michael deal with severe insomnia. Testimony presented during the trial described a situation where sleep had become extremely difficult for Michael during the period leading up to his planned comeback performances. As investigators reconstructed the timeline, they focused heavily on the final hours leading up to that moment. Phone records, medical charts, and witness accounts were examined to understand what had occurred during the night. The autopsy report later provided additional clinical details. It described Michael Jackson's physical condition at the time of death, including signs of long-term stress on the body. It also documented the presence of multiple injection sites, consistent with repeated medical treatment over time. To medical examiners, the report was factual and clinical, but to the public, it painted a far more emotional picture. As the case developed further, it eventually led to a criminal trial that drew worldwide attention. In 2011, Dr. Conrad Murray was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter in connection with Michael Jackson's death. But even after the verdict, not every question disappeared. Some details remained debated in public discussion, documentaries, and interviews. Different perspectives continued to circulate, and the complexity of the case kept it in public conversation for years. And that is why, even today, this part of Michael Jackson's story is still examined so closely. Because it is not just about a single moment. It is about a series of decisions, pressures, and circumstances that came together in a way that ultimately changed music history forever. What happened after Michael Jackson died? In the hours and days that followed, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. News of his death spread across every major media platform, and within minutes, it became the dominant story around the world. Television networks interrupted scheduled programming, radio stations shifted to non-stop tributes, and websites struggled to handle the surge of traffic as millions searched for confirmation. But the most powerful reaction came from the public. Fans gathered outside his home in Los Angeles, outside hospitals, and in city squares across different countries. Many people cried openly. Others simply stood in silence, unable to process what they had just heard. For many, it felt like a personal loss, even if they had never met him. Because Michael Jackson was more than a performer. He had become part of people's lives through his music, performances, and influence on global culture. On July 7, 2009, a public memorial service was held at the arena, now known as Crypto.com Arena in Los Angeles. It was one of the most watched memorial events in entertainment history. Millions of viewers tuned in worldwide to watch family members, friends, and fellow artists pay tribute to him. The ceremony included emotional speeches and musical performances, each reflecting a different side of his legacy. Some spoke about his talent, others about his kindness, and many about his impact on music and humanitarian work. But even after the public memorial, one important detail surprised many people. Michael Jackson was not buried that day. Instead, his burial took place later in complete privacy. Almost 2 months after his death, in September 2009, a private funeral ceremony was held, with only close family members and selected individuals in attendance. There was no live broadcast, no public viewing, and no media access. His body was placed inside Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, within the Great Mausoleum. The location is known for its restricted access and tightly controlled entry points. Even today, the specific area where he rests is not open to the public. This decision to keep the burial private was intentional. After years of intense media attention throughout his life, the family chose to protect his final resting place from crowds and constant public attention. However, that privacy also created something unexpected: mystery. Over time, the lack of public access and absence of visual confirmation from inside the mausoleum led to speculation and rumors online. Social media discussions, edited images, and viral claims began circulating, suggesting hidden details about his burial. But despite all the attention, no verified evidence has ever confirmed any of those claims. What remains instead is a heavily protected private resting place, and a legacy that continues to draw global interest. Because even in death, Michael Jackson remains one of the most discussed figures in entertainment history, and the conversation around him has never truly stopped. Michael Jackson's tomb, rumor that shocked the internet. 16 years after Michael Jackson was laid to rest, a strange claim began circulating across the internet. It didn't come from official news, it came from social media. A simple idea turned into something explosive: that Michael Jackson's tomb had been opened, and that after years of silence, something inside had finally been revealed. At first, it looked like just another online rumor, but it didn't stay small for long. Posts started spreading across YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and online forums. Some claimed there were secret images from inside the mausoleum. Others used dramatic headlines suggesting a hidden truth about Michael Jackson was finally coming out. And the more people saw it, the more real it started to feel. Millions of views, thousands of shares, endless speculation. But there was one major problem. None of it could be verified. No official statement ever confirmed that Michael Jackson's tomb was opened. No credible news outlet reported it. No documented evidence ever supported the viral claims. In fact, reality is much more controlled and private. Michael Jackson rests inside Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, within the Great Mausoleum, one of the most secure private burial locations in the United States. Access is heavily restricted, and entry is limited only to authorized personnel and select family access. The public has never been allowed inside his actual resting chamber. So, if nothing happened, why did the rumors spread so fast? Because this story was never really about a tomb, not a hidden discovery, not a shocking reveal inside a sealed tomb, but something far more common in today's world, where silence turns into speculation, and speculation spreads faster than facts. Michael Jackson's resting place has remained private since the day he was laid to rest. No verified evidence has ever shown otherwise. Yet, even without answers, the curiosity around him has never faded. Because Michael Jackson was never just a performer who lived in headlines. He was a global figure whose life was watched, analyzed, and debated from beginning to end.